Saturday morning felt deceptively calm, the kind of morning where sunlight slips through the blinds and pretends everything's fine. I was brushing my hair, making a grocery list in my head, while Ethan stood on the porch, phone pressed to his ear, saying something about a quick work call. He tossed me the car keys without looking. I caught them midair, smiling back out of habit. There was something in his voice, though, a small hesitation that snagged at me like a thread. As I walked to the car, the air felt unusually still. The interior smelled like his cologne, cedar and something sharp, something unfamiliar. I set my purse on the passenger seat and leaned forward to start the engine, when a flash of gold near the console caught my eye. It was an earring, delicate, glinting under the sunlight. A stranger's kind of pretty. My stomach tightened instantly. I picked it up, holding it between my fingers as if it might burn me. "What's this?" I called out. He shouted back, "What's what?" I raised my voice. "An earring. I don't remember owning anything like this." He walked over, forcing a laugh that didn't sound real. "Oh, that? That's yours, babe." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Mine? I don't even wear jewelry, Ethan. You know that." He shrugged, eyes flickering for just a second. "Maybe it's old. You probably forgot." But I could hear it, the lie, sitting heavy in the space between his words and the sound of his breathing. I wanted to believe him. God, I really did. But there was a flicker in his eyes that I'd never seen before, a kind of nervous shine that gave him away more than any confession ever could. He was smiling, sure, but it wasn't reaching his eyes. I stood there, still holding that little piece of gold, watching his face shift under the weight of my silence. "You're overthinking again," he said softly, almost rehearsed. And that was the moment I realized how easily lies can sound like love. The rest of the morning felt off balance. We drove to the store in separate cars, his idea, and the distance between us felt heavier than the traffic. I caught myself gripping the steering wheel too tightly, replaying his expression, his tone, that pause before he spoke. Everything inside me screamed that something wasn't right. And still, I smiled at the cashier, nodded at strangers, pretending my world wasn't trembling behind my ribs. When we got home, he acted as if nothing had happened. He whistled while unloading groceries, cracked jokes, kissed my forehead before heading to his laptop. And yet, every time I looked at him, I could almost see the reflection of that earring glinting in his eyes. It was small, almost invisible, but it had changed everything. That night, as I placed it on my nightstand, I whispered to myself, "You're lying, Ethan. I can hear it in the way you breathe." That night, I couldn't shake the image of it, that delicate gold earring, resting there like a secret I wasn't meant to find. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Ethan's breathing beside me. It was steady, calm, almost rehearsed, like someone pretending to be asleep. My chest ached with quiet anger. Every inhale of his felt like another layer of the lie pressing down on me. I turned to the nightstand. The earring caught the glow of the streetlight, mocking me with its shimmer. I reached out and touched it just to make sure it was real. The metal was cold, heavier than it should have been. How many lies can fit into something so small? I tried to convince myself it didn't mean anything, that maybe, just maybe, I was imagining the worst. But deep down, something in me already knew. This wasn't a mistake. It was evidence. A piece of someone else's story dropped right into mine, and it was waiting for me to listen. Ethan mumbled in his sleep, turning toward me, his arm brushing mine. I froze, caught between rage and heartbreak. There was so much I wanted to ask, so much I already knew, but I said nothing, not yet. I turned away, eyes open in the dark, promising myself I'd find the truth, even if it hurt, even if it shattered everything. Sleep never really came that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the earring, gleaming like a confession I hadn't asked for. By dawn, I'd given up trying to rest. I sat up in bed, the early light stretching across the room, touching the small gold piece resting on my nightstand. It looked harmless, almost innocent. But I knew better. I could feel the weight of its truth pressing against my chest. That little thing had started talking, and I was finally listening. I picked it up again, studying every curve, every reflection. That's when I noticed it, a tiny engraving on the back. MR. My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to think twice. Melissa Rivera. Ethan's co-worker. The same woman who laughed too loud at his jokes during office parties and left heart emojis under his photos. My pulse raced as I stared at the initials. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was proof. Quiet, cruel proof. When Ethan finally stirred beside me, I slipped the earring into the drawer before he could see it. He smiled drowsily, kissed my shoulder, and said something about how peaceful I looked. If only he knew. I forced a soft laugh, playing the role I'd perfected for years, the trusting wife, the calm presence. But inside, my mind was already spinning, rewinding every late meeting, every work trip, every moment that hadn't added up. The pattern was clear now, and I was done pretending I couldn't see it. At breakfast, I tried to sound casual, my voice sugar-coated with calm. I poured coffee, buttered toast, and asked, "How's work? Still busy with Melissa's project?" The name slipped out like a test, light and effortless, but his reaction hit like thunder. He choked on his coffee, coughing into his napkin. "What? Oh, yeah, she's great at what she does." I smiled, small and sharp. "I'm sure she is." He didn't catch the edge in my tone. He never did when he was lying. I watched him closely as he talked about deadlines and meetings, his words tumbling too fast, too polished. He'd always been good at sounding convincing. That's what made him so dangerous. For a moment, I studied his hands, the same ones that used to make me feel safe. Now they just looked foreign. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't show in your eyes. It shows in the way you stir your coffee slower, or how you smile at all the wrong times. When he left for work, the silence in the kitchen felt heavier than ever. I sat there for a long time, tracing circles on my mug, my heart thudding with a strange mix of fear and clarity. I wasn't ready to confront him. Not yet. I wanted to know before I acted. I needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Because once I did, there'd be no going back. And something deep inside me already knew. I was about to find exactly what I was looking for. That evening, Ethan came home humming, as if the morning's tension had vanished. He set his briefcase down, kissed my cheek, and started talking about dinner plans. I nodded, smiling just enough to keep him comfortable. Inside, though, my thoughts were spinning like a storm. The earring, the initials, the way he'd looked at me when I said her name. It was all connected. He thought I'd moved on, but I was only getting started. Later that night, while he showered, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, steam curling around me like fog. I stared at my reflection, calm, controlled, unrecognizable. "Don't lose your composure," I whispered. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg for the truth. No. If he wanted to play with deception, I'd master silence. Silence, after all, unsettles liars more than fury ever could. I just had to wait for the right moment. When he stepped out of the bathroom, smiling like nothing had happened, I met his eyes and smiled back. He had no idea that the game had already begun, that every move he made was now being watched, measured, memorized. I turned off the light, slipped under the covers, and listened to the rhythm of his breathing beside me. For the first time, I didn't feel love or hate. I felt purpose. And by morning, I already knew my next step. By the next week, my suspicion had turned into strategy. I wasn't just wondering anymore. I was planning. I needed to see him lie with my own eyes, not just hear it. So when I told Ethan I'd be visiting my sister for the weekend, I said it with the sweetest smile I could manage. He didn't hesitate, didn't even ask when I'd be back. He just kissed me goodbye, told me to drive safe, and went back inside like nothing about us had changed. But I didn't drive to my sister's. Instead, I parked my car a few streets away, engine off, lights dim. The night was cool, the kind that carries every sound a little too far. Footsteps, doors, betrayal. From where I sat, I could see our house, perfectly still in the darkness. I waited, patient, watching the hours melt away. And then, around 8, the porch light flicked on, and there he was, dressed sharp, smiling at his reflection in the window. My breath caught as he locked the door behind him. That wasn't a man staying home to rest. That was a man with somewhere to be, and someone to impress. I followed him at a distance, careful, heart thundering with every turn. The city lights blurred past, my fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter than I realized. When he finally pulled into a quiet, romantic restaurant across town, my stomach sank. I didn't even need to see who he was meeting. But I looked anyway. She was waiting for him outside. Melissa Rivera. Even from a distance, I recognized that long hair, that easy confidence, that careless laugh I'd seen at the office party. She leaned in to hug him, her hand brushing his chest like she'd done it 100 times before. He didn't flinch. He smiled. And just like that, my world split open, quietly, cleanly, like glass cracking beneath silk. Every lie he'd told fit neatly into this moment. I watched, frozen, the truth unraveling right in front of me. They walked inside hand in hand, disappearing into the warm glow of the restaurant. I stayed in the car, gripping my phone, forcing my breath to steady. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness, from control. I lifted the camera and took a photo, framing them perfectly between the window's reflection and the soft candlelight. Proof. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just captured it, because now I had something stronger than heartbreak. I had evidence. For a long time, I sat there, staring at the photo, the ache in my chest slowly hardening into resolve. The woman I'd been, the trusting, patient version of myself, ended in that parking lot. I felt her leave quietly, making room for someone sharper, colder, deliberate. He thought I'd never find out. He thought I'd stay small, safe, silent. But watching them laugh inside that restaurant, I made a silent promise. This wasn't going to end with tears. It would end with consequence. When I finally drove away, the night air felt sharper, like it could cut through thought itself. I didn't go home right away. I parked by the old pier, watching the water shift under the streetlights, trying to quiet the storm inside me. My heart was beating too fast for tears, too loud for fear. I replayed every "I love you" he'd ever said, each one now sounding like a line from a script he never meant. Betrayal doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers your name with a smile. By the time I got home, the house looked different. Every corner felt staged, every memory contaminated. His jacket on the chair, his shoes by the door, props in a life that wasn't real anymore. I walked to the bedroom, opened my nightstand drawer, and pulled out the earring, the one that started everything. I set it beside the photo on my phone and stared at them together. The past and present finally met, and I was done being the audience. I crawled into bed before he returned, pretending to be asleep when he slipped under the covers. He smelled faintly of wine and guilt. I could feel him exhale beside me, unaware that his next breath would be the start of his undoing. Lying there, I realized I didn't need to ask for the truth anymore. I already had it. Now all I needed was patience. And a plan. I didn't confront him right away. That would have been too easy. Too satisfying. No, I wanted him to feel the quiet before the storm, the illusion of safety. So I smiled through breakfasts, kissed him goodnight, and asked about work like I actually cared. He relaxed again, thinking the worst had passed. But while he sat at his desk pretending to build a future, I was already drafting his downfall. Revenge, I learned, doesn't come from rage. It comes from focus. Every evening after he fell asleep, I gathered proof, emails, bank statements, credit card charges from that restaurant. Each document was another piece of the puzzle, every photo another nail in his perfect little world. I printed them one by one, sliding them into a neat, labeled folder. The sound of the printer became a heartbeat, steady, patient, unstoppable. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about reclaiming every part of myself he'd stolen through his lies. By the end of the week, my plan was ready. I made sure the house was spotless, the lights soft, dinner warm on the table. the illusion of domestic bliss. When he came home, his face lit up, surprised by my sweetness. "Wow, what's all this?" he asked, loosening his tie. I smiled, slow and calm. "Just wanted to make something special, love." I could tell he believed it. Every word. That's the thing about liars. They assume everyone's still playing their game. We sat down to eat, the clink of silverware echoing louder than usual. He talked about work, about deadlines, about how tired he was lately. I nodded along, watching his mouth move, thinking of how easily those same lips had whispered to her. Halfway through dinner, I set my fork down and said softly, "I was cleaning your car today." His hand froze midair. "Found something funny." The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Pure, still, charged with recognition. He laughed, the same nervous laugh from that Saturday morning. "Oh?" he said, voice cracking around the edges. I met his eyes. "Another earring?" His smile died. He blinked once, twice. "You're imagining things." "Don't bother," I cut him off. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. "I already sent a pair to HR at your office. They're looking into your client dinners with Melissa Rivera." Watching the color drain from his face felt like watching a curtain finally fall. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His body stiffened, panic flickering across his features. "You didn't," he began, and I smiled. That small, deliberate smile that says everything without words. "Oh, I did." I stood, gathering the plates like we were done discussing a minor inconvenience. "You'll find divorce papers on your desk," I added. "I made sure to include the photos, just in case you forget who you were with that night." Then I walked away, calm, unshaken, free. Behind me, I could hear him breathing hard, that shallow, panicked rhythm of a man realizing the walls have finally closed in. He called my name once, then again, louder. But I didn't turn around. I walked straight to the front door, my heels clicking against the floor like punctuation marks at the end of a very long sentence. "Laura, please," he shouted. The sound cracked, desperate, human. I paused only long enough to say, "You taught me to believe your lies. Now you can live in them." The air outside was cold and clean, nothing like the suffocating stillness I'd left behind. I stood there for a moment, letting it hit my face, grounding myself in the quiet. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt untethered, no longer orbiting his moods, his secrets, his guilt. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but reality was simpler. It didn't come with fireworks or tears. Just release, just me walking away, lighter with every step. As I drove off, the folder of evidence sat in the passenger seat beside me, humming softly in the streetlight glow. It wasn't vengeance that filled me. It was clarity. He'd handed me all the tools to destroy him. All I did was build something better with them. By the time I reached the end of our street, the house behind me was just another scene from a story I'd outgrown. And somewhere in that quiet stretch of road, I smiled. Because the best revenge isn't rage. It's freedom. The days that followed were almost eerily silent. No more phone calls asking where I was. No more footsteps pacing through the house at midnight. Just peace. A strange, heavy kind at first, but still peace. Then the messages began. Apologies typed too late. Words I used to crave now hollow and weightless. "Laura, please, we can fix this," he wrote. "But you can't rebuild something that was never real. You can only sweep the ashes and walk away clean." Within a week, I heard through a mutual friend that he'd been called into a meeting at work. Something about misuse of company funds. I didn't need to ask. I already knew what they'd found. The photos, the dinners, the pattern. He'd built his whole career on charm and performance, and now both had turned against him. Melissa, of course, was quick to distance herself. Loyalty has a short lifespan when reputation's on the line. She blocked him before the ink on the HR report was dry. At night, I'd sometimes listen to his voicemails. Not out of longing, more out of curiosity, like studying a language I used to speak. "Laura, I made a mistake," he said in one. "I love you. Please, let me explain. But the thing about betrayal is that once you've seen it up close, it rewires something in you. Love can't live where lies have rooted. So I'd press delete, one message at a time, until his voice became just another sound I didn't recognize anymore. Freedom, I discovered, doesn't arrive with fanfare. It comes quietly, in the way you start sleeping through the night, or how coffee begins to taste like coffee again. I rented a small apartment downtown, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every box I unpacked felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten. The walls were bare, the air smelled like paint and new beginnings. I spent that first night sitting on the floor, laptop open, designing the logo for my new business, my own name at the top for once. For years, I'd put my ambitions aside to make room for his. I'd been the silent supporter, the background to his spotlight. But now there was no stage, no act. Just me, steady and unfiltered. I started taking on clients, small projects at first, then bigger ones. And with every click, every email, I felt lighter. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was rewriting it, line by line, with a steadier hand and a clearer mind. Sometimes people asked if I'd ever speak to him again. I'd smile and say, "There's nothing left to say." Because there really wasn't. Closure doesn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it's the silence that seals it. I didn't need an apology or an explanation. The truth had already done its job. It had set me free. Weeks turned into months, and with each one I felt a little less like the woman who'd stared at that earring in disbelief. One afternoon, while scrolling through the news, his name appeared on my screen. Ethan Miller under investigation for tax fraud. My pulse didn't even quicken. It was just confirmation that life, in its own poetic timing, finishes what we can't. I closed the article, sipped my coffee, and smiled. Sometimes justice doesn't need witnesses. It just needs patience. That evening, I walked to my favorite cafe downtown, the one with mismatched chairs and the smell of cinnamon that lingers in your clothes. I ordered my usual latte and sat by the window with my laptop. The hum of conversation, the clinking of cups, the faint music in the background. It all felt like mine now. The past wasn't gone, but it had lost its grip. What once felt like pain now felt like perspective. What once broke me now built me. When the barista brought my drink, she said, "You seem happy today." I laughed softly. "You could say I finally found the perfect accessory." She grinned, teasing. "Oh yeah? What's that?" I held up the gold earring hanging from my keychain. "A reminder," I said, "never to believe a man who says, 'It's yours.'" She laughed, and so did I, because for the first time it wasn't bitter. It was free. It's strange how something so small could change everything. That earring, that glittering little lie, became my turning point, my quiet revolution. I used to think betrayal was the end of a story. Now I know it's just a brutal kind of truth-telling, a reset the heart never asks for, but desperately needs. Every scar it left taught me something about strength, the kind that doesn't roar, but hums beneath the skin, steady and certain. Sometimes I still catch myself glancing at it when I grab my keys. The light hits it, and for a split second I remember who I was the day I found it, trembling, doubting, lost. And then I remember who I became because of it. The woman who refused to break quietly, the woman who turned deceit into direction, the woman who realized that freedom isn't given. It's taken, piece by piece, decision by decision, until you no longer owe your peace to anyone else. If you asked me now what I'd say to him, I think I'd just smile. He gave me lies. She gave me proof. And I turned both into freedom. That's the story I carry with me, not of loss, but of liberation. Because sometimes the thing meant to destroy you ends up being the thing that sets you free. And mine? It was gold, delicate, and shaped like an earring.